Welcome in to the flagship podcast recapping Texas's 52-37 win over Arkansas. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. And Eric, tonight, well, it's now nighttime at DKR. Of course, this game kicked off at 2:30, and it had shootout written all over it from the jump, and it was indeed a shootout. Arkansas scores on its first four possessions, 2 field goals, 2 touchdowns, and only trailed 24-20 at halftime. But Arch Manning, ladies and gentlemen, Arch Manning accounted for 6 touchdowns, 4 passing, 1 rushing, and 1 receiving. He caught a 4-yard touchdown pass from his roommate, Parker Livingston, who in turn got 2 passes thrown his way for 104 yards. Arch Manning was ridiculous to start this game, Eric, and he was pretty much ridiculous the entire time he was in until Matt Caldwell replaced him. And he needed to be, Eric, because Arch Manning accounted for 11 explosive pass plays of 15 yards or more on a night when Arkansas had 15 explosive pass plays and run plays and racked up more than 400 yards and obviously 37 points. Eric, your thoughts?
Chip, remember when there was a vocal minority, and I want to emphasize vocal minority, Chip, of fans or people just around the Texas Longhorn space who felt that, man, what would happen if this team had a different quarterback? My, oh my, how times have indeed changed. I don't know about you, but there's no denying in my mind, Texas doesn't win this game unless they have the quarterback who they have on the roster, that being Arch Manning. You talk about the fact that this was a 24-20 game entering the half. There was a little bit of trepidation, maybe not from the players, maybe not from the fans, but I know when I looked at the drive chart and I saw that Texas put up 24 first half points, 21 first half points, and then you take a look at the drive chart, it's punt, and then the field goal to make it 24 first half points. You're wondering, okay, is this where the slide happens, right? How are they going to respond? Well, Texas responded right out of the half, scoring, putting points on the board. Again, it wasn't a flawless victory for the Horns. We'll get into some of the areas that they can improve. But in my mind, for one night, Chip, and I'm not going to make more out of this than there is. This is an Arkansas team that entered the game allowing a lot of points, over 33 points per game they were allowing on the season. So this is not the same type of defense that they're going to face in Texas A&M. However, this is where you have to be fair, right? I can't sit here and say, oh, well, they did it against a poor defense when, quite frankly, they struggled against UTEP. They struggled against Kentucky, right? We're seeing progressions, signs of progressions, most specifically from the player you referenced. You started with number 16, quarterback Arch Manning.
Yeah, Arch Manning. Just go back a month, really, he had a great game against Oklahoma. Obviously, he played well against Sam Houston, but once you get into SEC play, he had, he's 21 of 27 against Oklahoma. But then, at Kentucky, I thought he played well against Florida. He took a pounding, but he stood in there, made some big throws. But he didn't get much protection in that game. He led the comeback at Mississippi State in the fourth quarter. Now, Eric, we're looking at a guy who Texas was winning in spite of Arch Manning earlier in the year. He had the 10 straight incompletions against UTEP. Now, this is a guy who can carry his team. And the running game wasn't great tonight. Let's just put it that way. Texas ended up running it 28 times for 97 yards. That's 3.5 yards per carry against a defense that was giving up 181 yards rushing per game and 4.7 yards per carry. Texas, again, averaged 3.5 yards per carry, had 1 touchdown run from Arch Manning. Quintravian Wisner, 15 carries, 67 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. But, this running game, we haven't seen a lot of it here lately. We didn't see it at Georgia. Didn't see it a lot tonight. Didn't need to. Arch Manning's completing, 4 touchdown passes and catching a touchdown pass and running for a touchdown, and Texas runs away from Arkansas. But how did Texas beat Texas A&M last year? 43 carries, 300 yards rushing. Quintravian Wisner, 33 carries, 186 yards rushing. Is that what we're going to see next Friday here at DKR, Eric? Or are we going to see Arch Manning trying to carve up that A&M defense, even though he's going to be staring down, pass rushers like Cassius Howell? Your thoughts on what this game against Arkansas did in terms of momentum for Texas going into next week?
Chip, I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer, right? I'm trying not to throw, cold water on this win. You asked me if we're going to see the type of performance that we saw last year against A&M. If you ask me this, or as you've asked me this right now, my answer is no. I cannot confidently say that Texas is going to rush for 300 yards when, quite frankly, they have not had that kind of rushing output against SEC competition. Entering this game, Texas was averaging just north of 73 yards per game against SEC competition. So whether we like it or not, the 90-something yards on the ground, and Chip, my memory serves me correct, there were no sacks given up today, correct?
That's right.
So that's all yardage, right? We're not talking about anything that's taken away from sack yardage. That's a positive in the right direction. So I can't sit here and confidently say, okay, they're going to come out and rush for $150 or 200. What I think the hope for Longhorn fans has to be is that they'll be able to run it enough to where they can keep the offense on schedule. I wrote this in my instant reaction. Quintravian Wisner, I believe he had 15 carries for 67 yards, if my memory is correct, on the day. Only twice was he stopped for either a gain of no yards or negative yardage, right? At least in those gains, in those carries, the ball is moving forward. Even if it's 2 yards, even if it's 3 yards. Chip, I said this to you during the game. I felt that Steve Sarkisian, there was a moment in the drive that ended up being a punt. Quintravian Wisner opened the drive with a 4-yard carry. Then it was 2 straight incompletions to Emmett Mosley. I felt there were opportunities to run the ball to stay on schedule. The rest of the game, they at least did that to keep the defense honest, right? It's not a matter of running it 8, 9, 10, 11 times, okay, in a row. This team is showing, quite frankly, that they're just not capable of doing that. If they do it next week, it'll be the first time they've really done it all year against SEC competition. It's running it situationally, right? If you get a first down run, follow up. Put yourself. It's the difference between, it's the difference between going 2nd and 6 and then throwing, end up in 3rd and 6, or 2nd and 6 and maybe you end up in a 3rd and 4, right? Those things matter. Those things truly do matter on a drive. Situationally, if Texas can do that the way they did today, it gives them a chance, Chip, because we can't emphasize this enough, right? With the level of football that Arch Manning is playing against a really good A&M defense, if you can at least walk in on a play and say there's a 50-50 shot of a pass and a run, that opens up the playbook in a way that is different than 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. Okay, it's a clear passing down, right? Those things matter.
Yeah, Texas converted 8 of 12 third downs. 6 of those third downs were converted by Arch Manning passes. There was 1 converted by penalty and 1 converted by Quintravian Wisner running for 4 yards on 3rd and 3 in the third quarter. Eric, the Texas defense, probably the worst news to come out of this game, a game in which they did not have their leading tackler, Anthony Hill, due to his, the broken or fractured 5th metacarpal in his hand, suffered at Georgia. They lose Anthony Smith to a targeting ejection in the third quarter, which means he is going to be suspended for the first half against Texas A&M. Anthony Smith, a vital component of the Texas linebacker room. Anthony Hill, it appears as of right now, is trending towards being able to play against Texas A&M. Probably going to have to club him up, but at least he'll be on the field because anytime you're playing without your best player on defense, it hurts. And the players said as much. But your thoughts on obviously Anthony Hill not playing in this game against Arkansas and Anthony Smith being suspended for the first half against Texas A&M.
Yeah, let me address one thing real quick. Rex St. Charles, you are correct. I misspoke when I said really good. I meant against the run, that they're a good defense against the run. They're a top 40 unit in the nation against the run, at least entering the weekend. I'm sure their numbers will probably go up inflated because they played Sanford. So you're correct. They're not really good. This is not a top 5 defensive unit. So just want to clarify that. Okay, to your question about Anthony Hill, right? His impact. Steve Sarkisian noted that he didn't feel like some of the busted plays, some of the chunk plays, that, just having a quick brain fart there. Arkansas, that's who they played. I got, A&M, I got Georgia on the mind. That some of the chunk plays that Arkansas had, they weren't necessarily a byproduct of Anthony Hill. That's what Steve Sarkisian said. Just, some fundamental things that they want to get cleaned up. I asked him that question post-game specifically because I want to know, this was a offense in Arkansas that features a dual threat. Right. And Taylor Green, of course, he went out seemingly with injury, and KJ Jackson came in as well. Chip noted the amount of chunk plays that came via Arkansas. Right. Well, you are facing, and now Rex, I'll, kind of amend myself here. I'll redeem myself, a really good dual threat quarterback in Marcel Reed, a different level than Taylor Green. Right. I think the hope in my mind is this was a solid start for Ty Anthony Smith. We saw Leon Lafau score a touchdown on fumble recovery. That Anthony Hill can come in. The guys were good enough to hold it down for 1 week, but Anthony Hill can come in and still give that boost, right? I think, Chip, the biggest thing, and we'll wait for Steve Sarkisian to watch the film and give his assessment on Monday, but first play of the game, you saw Mike Washington go for 40-something yards, right? Some of those things, some of the responsibilities of calling the defense, right? I think that the hope is that those things can be a little more streamlined. You want to have some of those confusions. I'm not putting this all on missing Anthony Hill, Chip, because it looked like it's from the sideline. But we saw a play where Colin Simmons was completely not on the play, right? It was a 10-man defense because Colin Simmons was coming to the Texas sideline, didn't know whether he was on or off, right? That was the play that ended up being a near touchdown for Arkansas. The receiver couldn't hang on to the ball in the end zone, right? So I think the hope is some of those things will get fixed.
Yeah. And kudos again. It was a Colin Simmons strip sack, his 10th sack of the year, that Leonga Lafau picked up and ran 52 yards for a touchdown. Then he throws the football at Bevo. He hit the big fella. Michael Taft said, "Hey, listen, man, I'm a proud member of the Texas Cowboys, Silver Spurs, something." And he said, we celebrate with Bevo. We don't throw the ball at Bevo. For crying out loud. But nonetheless, it was a great play by Colin Simmons to get his 10th sack. And of course, Leonga Lafau. It felt like Leonga Lafau needed a play like that, Eric. He's had some struggles in coverage. He's been really good against the run. But that first 40-yard run, he kind of got sucked into the wrong gap. He may have been held. But yeah, boom, 40-yard run right on the first play of the game for Arkansas. They actually had an explosive play on the first play of their first 3 drives. It was that kind of it was a burn the film first 16 minutes for the Texas defense, Eric, including the 20-yard run by Mike Washington where he runs over Michael Taft. Like, I thought Taft might have been concussed. He got hit so hard on that run. But nonetheless, they finally did get some stops, and Texas opened up a big lead. Arkansas scored late to close the gap. Big day for the receivers, obviously, when Arch Manning's throwing for 4 touchdowns. 3 of those touchdown passes went to DeAndre Moore on passes of 46, 8, and 10 yards. Obviously, Arch Manning had a touchdown reception, and then Parker Livingston, who had 2 catches for 104 yards, had a 54-yard touchdown and then another 50-yarder to go with it. But Eric, big day for DeAndre Moore, who had not been in the end zone a lot. Actually, Jack Endries, there was a tight end big play sighting. Jack Endries had 2 catches for 49 yards. And Emmett Mosley continues to be a clutch target for Arch Manning, and Ryan Wingo had 6 catches for 81 yards. Your thoughts on the pass catchers for Texas tonight?
I thought it was a great rebound game for the pass catchers, no pun intended. Also wrote this in my instant reaction that Ryan Wingo, 6 targets, 6 catches, Chip. If you take a look at the numbers entering today's game, Ryan Wingo had been targeted 74 times, holding 40 passes. That's just over 54% in terms of your rate of receiving passes. That's the lowest of any pass catcher on the team, any full-time pass catcher, right? You got a couple guys who don't play full-time. That's not number one target, right? That reminds you, Chip, you were here for this. I wasn't here for this. The 2022, I believe my memory serves me correct, season where Xavier Worthy was, 100 and something targets, right? And he had 50 something receptions, right? I think it was a 58 reception year for Xavier Worthy.
Most of those misses were in the Oklahoma State game in 2022. Anyway.
No, I appreciate the context, right? So that's where those numbers kind of trend for Ryan Wingo. That's not what you want out of your number one receiver, right? So it was nice to have him 6 targets, 6 receptions. DeAndre Moore is a guy who we know, right? And yeah, sure, Demo talked about Biletnikoff and wanted to do all these things entering the year, right? I'm not holding it against Demo, but he is a crucial part of this offense. The offense is running better when he is involved, getting open from the slot. Chip, the scramble drill, I thought was huge. How many times in the red zone? We saw a couple of touchdowns where Arch Manning missed a shake off an Arkansas defender, and the guys now know how to react to him, right? It's not early in the season, or earlier in the season, I should say, when guys were standing around in awe, watching Arch, like, oh, what's our athletic quarterback going to do? No, now they're breaking off and trying to find ways to get open. As I mentioned, I thought Jack Endries being involved in the offense, a 37-yard reception, getting big plays, kind of opportunities to catch and run and do things, not just, the little 4 or 5 yard shallow passes. I thought that was big as well. So overall, a nice rebound day for the pass catchers and much needed confidence-wise going into next week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought the play of, we talk about Arch Manning's maturity and how has he matured, his pocket presence, his decision-making. He's taking care of the football. I mean, he's accounted for 15 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions in the last 6 games. And you'll take that because that's all SEC play. But I thought one of the more telling touchdown passes was the 10-yarder to DeAndre Moore. He gets flushed. He's nearly sacked. Then he looks like he's going to run, draws 2 defenders, and he finds DeAndre Moore through traffic, throws a dart to DeAndre Moore in the back of the end zone. And, talk about keeping your eyes downfield. Steve Sarkisian said today in, the post-game press conference, earlier in the year, he said, I feel like Arch would have just put his eyes down and run. And so, keeping his eyes up. And I believe that was a third down touchdown pass. So huge play right there from Arch Manning, and on a day full of them from Arch Manning. I mean, people were sending texts and tweets and everything saying, okay, Arch Manning has grown up. And look, they're going to need him to be at his best. They're going to need this kind of performance next Friday night at 6:30 at DKR if they're going to ruin Texas A&M's undefeated season, Eric, because Marcel Reed has shown that he can put up those kinds of performances. The fourth down touchdown pass to beat Notre Dame. Obviously, they put 40 on the board several times and have gone on the road and won big games. So it doesn't get any better than that. Early thoughts, Eric, on Texas A&M next Friday?
Yeah, and like I said, Rick St. Charles, I did a good job correcting me. They're talking about the defense, but the first thought that comes to mind with the Aggie defense, again, it's not necessarily overwhelming. I want to say they're 63rd, 64th in the nation in points per game allowed, but they do an excellent job of stopping the run. If Texas is going to have a chance to win this game, they cannot be one-dimensional offensively, right? So with A&M allowing an average, I think it's 128 per game on the ground, and we'll get into this and take it or leave it, right? I'm sure we will during the week. Can Texas hit 100, right? That's keeping the defense honest.
Good heavens.
That's being balanced.
It's been a struggle.
It's been a struggle. If they can do that, that is, I think, kind of the target mark where you set the rushing guard, the rushing offense, the mark. If they can do that, it'll keep things on schedule. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing, I think, you talk about Arch Manning's development. We can get into that in the week. This defense, Chip, 37 points. And I know Steve Sarkisian said, hey, this is an Arkansas team that's been putting up points against a lot of, programs, right? If they play in the SEC, if they're playing in a different league, maybe they're bowl eligible right now. That's true, but I don't want to, do this thing where we move the bar, right? We had high expectations for this Texas defense. And I think through the early part of the year, this Texas defense was playing at a really high level. I think it's a fair question. It's probably in one of my 5 pressing questions. Has this defense just run out of gas? There's nothing wrong with. I shouldn't say nothing wrong with it. It's not ideal for Texas, but that's nothing to be ashamed of. They've had to play 80-something plays multiple times this year. They've had to go to Ohio State. They've had to keep this team in games multiple times. Do they have enough gas for this matchup against a highly talented dual threat quarterback in Marcel Reed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a legit question because Texas did not give up 30 points in their first 6 games of the season, or excuse me, the first 7 games of the season. They've now given up at least 30 points in their last 4 games. In fact, they're giving up close to 34 points per game in the win over Mississippi State, the win over Vanderbilt, the loss to Georgia, and now the win over Arkansas. So, on defense, the only stat that matters is points. And so Texas's defense is trending in the wrong direction. Now, you didn't have Michael Taft against Mississippi State. You didn't have Anthony Hill tonight against Arkansas, but Eric, that's too much. I mean, giving up 38 to Mississippi State, giving up 31 to Vanderbilt, giving up 35 to Georgia, 37 to Arkansas. Those are some of the better offenses in the SEC, but still it's too much. So, that's absolutely something that you're going to have to get cleaned up. Now, as far as penalties, Eric, man, we were trending in the right direction. I think, did both of us take the over-under was 5 penalties?
Yeah, I think both of us took the over. I
believe. Okay. Phew. Yeah. Sorry. No, it's not. But that's just the way of the world. I mean, that's how Texas rolls. They roll with penalties. Tonight, 7 penalties on the Longhorns. And that's, that's not where you want to be either. Texas needs to make sure that that's not happening against Texas A&M. Eric, closing thoughts from Darrell K. Royal, Texas Memorial Stadium, where Texas scores a 52-37 win over Arkansas.
Chip, I don't think we can talk about it enough. For the beating, metaphorically and literally, that Arch Manning has taken this season, whether it be on the field, from national pundits, from speculation of is he a bust, is he just a name, so on and so forth. When he performs like this, you have to shout it out. Again, I am not going to sit here and say, oh, it happened against an Arkansas defense that isn't that good, because guess what? They didn't perform. This offense did not perform up to par against a UTEP, a Kentucky, and sometimes in other spaces as well, right? Most notably kind of that Mississippi State stretch where it looked like, man, the game got away from them. Then of course they come back in that 4th quarter, right? I have to give Arch Manning credit. I tweeted this out saying he's played really good football the last 3 weeks. Well, you can scratch that. He played really good football the last 4 weeks. And for Texas fans, hopefully it's a 5th week.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Arch Manning looks like a quarterback now who can carry his team if he has to. And he did have to tonight. Obviously, defense gave up 37 points. And Arch Manning accounted for 45, or the offense accounted for 45. Leon Galafau, with his scoop and score, came up with the other 7 points. So, yeah, good time for Arch Manning to look like a total stud. Again, he accounts for 6 touchdowns tonight in the win over Arkansas. It looks like Anthony Hill Jr., Texas' leading tackler, is trending towards playing against Texas A&M, and that will be big because Texas lost Ty Anthony Smith, their rising star sophomore linebacker, to a targeting ejection in the second half, which means he will be suspended for the first half against Texas A&M. And it will be 11-0 A&M after their 48-0 win over Samford against 8-3 Texas. When I asked some of the players what it would mean to ruin an undefeated season from Texas A&M, most said, it's not really about them. It's about us. It's about us playing the best we can, trying to control what we can control. And if they can get that win, and depending on what happens in front of them, maybe there's a lottery ticket odds for Texas to get into the college football playoff. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this flagship podcast recap of Texas's 52-37 win over Arkansas. Please like and subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Feel free to leave us a 5-star rating if you're so inclined. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.